Thanks, everybody. Well, first off, it's really good to be home. And almost all of the formative lessons that I learned about government and public service, I learned with the people here in this community. Jerry Johnson is sitting right over there. Jerry and I served in the same office for nearly 10 years together, along with many other great prosecutors who served by our side and tried to do right for the people of this community. And I'm greatly appreciative for the kind words that Gary Mallory mentioned about the kind of ethic that has pushed forward my career over the last 22 years. And he's right. The goal of this campaign for governor is to restore in the people of the state of Missouri that this government can work, that people can work together, that we can have agreements and compromises that will lead to a greater good and bring forward a state that can make progress again. Let me tell you something. We are living in a very interesting time in Jefferson City. I have never seen the business community of this state in its entirety, Kansas City, St. Louis, the Missouri Chamber of Commerce that spreads out all over the entire state. I have never seen the business community in this state as angry with the Republican Party as they are at this very moment. The so-called party of business has not put forward an economic development bill in over 3 years. There has not been one jobs bill that has been brought forward in the Missouri Capitol since August of 2013. And what do we have in its place? They're not running this government like it's a business. They're running this government like they're a group of extremists. In the well of the Senate, on August 28th, until about 48 hours ago when they made an agreement to come back from the precipice, Planned Parenthood was about to go on trial in the well of the Missouri Senate, being held in contempt. A private citizen and a private organization has not been tried in the well of the Missouri Senate, as far as we are aware, since 1903, more than 110 years ago. And yet they saw fit to take this organization because they did not jump through all of the hoops that the Republican Party snapped their fingers and demanded of them. Show why they should not be held in contempt. This organization that is providing cancer screenings and mammograms and that was this week completely defunded from the Missouri state budget. That's in the Senate. In the House, we have Senate Joint Resolution 39, which is discriminatory legislation that is being brought forward against the state's LGBT community. Flying a flag of discrimination over this state's business community has the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, the Kansas City Chamber, the St. Louis Chamber furious with this Republican Party because they desperately want this General Assembly to get back to the business of creating jobs and lifting up business, and to stop with all of this divisive social engineering that they are attempting to put through. My friends, our state capitol used to be the place where you'd go to manage government. Government isn't managed in the state capitol any longer. What is managed in the state capitol now is politics. Many of the legislators down there are just learning the difference between Medicare and Medicaid. I swear that I think that half of the state legislature, if you ask them on the front steps of the Capitol if they could provide you directions over to the Department of Natural Resources, would have no idea where it is. But they're darn sure that Planned Parenthood needs to stop providing any state-funded mammograms or any state-funded cancer screenings. They're darn positive of that. They're darn positive that the next bill that needs to come through the General Assembly should restrict the rights of voters and pass a voter ID in the next 3 weeks. And they're darn sure, these Republicans are, that we are about to get a watered-down ethics bill. That they're trying to pull a watered-down ethics bill over the eyes of the citizens of this state that really means almost nothing. Let me tell you a story that outrages me and I think will outrage you. This happened this legislative session. The legislative assistant of a state representative called a lobbyist and said, there are a bunch of us legislators and we want to go to dinner at the Capitol Grill on Saturday night. The legislative assistant called on a Saturday, said to the lobbyist, we want you to pay for the dinner and we're all going to meet over at the Capitol Grill. The lobbyist said back to them over the cell phone, you know, I am in St. Louis. I'm not in Kansas City at the Capitol Grill. Could you tell the state representative that maybe another time I would be happy to host all of the legislators at Capitol Grill? The legislative assistant hung up the phone. 3 minutes later, the legislative assistant calls a second time and said, well, the state representative said that you don't actually have to be there. Could you just give us your credit card number? The lobbyist said back, you know, I'm in St. Louis and it's an hour from now that you're all having dinner. I feel uncomfortable with that. Why don't you tell the state representative we'll do it another time? Call ends. 5 minutes later, the lobbyist gets a text message on their telephone that says, call the Capitol Grill, here's the telephone number, this is the maitre d's name, leave your credit card number. That is the type of arrogance that is occurring down at our state capitol. We need comprehensive ethics reform in this state, and we need it now. Not only has the Republican Party not passed an economic development bill in 3 years, but they also are refusing to invest in the infrastructure of this state that will create jobs. And let's start with healthcare infrastructure. There have been 4 hospitals that have closed in rural Missouri in the last 2 years. The Sac-Osage Hospital in Osceola, the Rehabilitation Center in Mount Vernon, the Parkland Health Center in Farmington, and the Southeast Health Center in Reynolds County. All rural Missouri hospitals that have closed because the funding formula has changed for health care in this country, and the refusal of the Missouri Republican Party to adopt the Affordable Care Act and expand health care investment in this state is causing these hospitals to shut down. And these 4 hospitals are not going to be the end of the story if we don't change course. If a farmer in Osceola has a stroke, he has minutes to go before TPA has to be injected into his system to diminish the effects of that stroke. He needs to get to a rural hospital within an hour and have that drug injected into him. If rural hospitals in our state are closing, then living in rural Missouri becomes harder. The federal government is taxing this state $2 billion a year. It goes to Washington, D.C., it's turned around in a check and sent back to the Missouri legislature, $2 billion. And it sits uncashed year after year, 3 years in a row now, $6 billion sitting uncashed out in the mailbox in front of the state capitol. Because the Republican Party will not allow anyone to go out to cash the check and invest it in our rural hospital system, which will stop these hospitals from closing in rural Missouri and will create 40,000 new healthcare jobs, most of which are above the state's median wage, throughout this state, not just in Kansas City and in St. Louis, but in Bernie and in Parma and in Tarkio and in Hannibal and in Carthage and in small communities all over Missouri. But because they dislike the individual who's only going to be president for the next 8 months, they have turned down $6 billion of your money that was sent to Washington, D.C. and refused to bring it back into our communities and to do good for our citizens. No, my friends, government is not being managed at our state capitol. Politics is being managed today at our state capitol. Rural Missouri has another thing that it's starting to wake up to, and that is the refusal to come up with a funding formula for transportation in our state. The roads in Missouri are $250 million per year underfunded. We have one of the largest road systems in the country. We have one of the smallest road budgets in the country. And what rural Missouri, including this community, and my old Senate district, in Bates and Vernon and Johnson, including Cass, what they're waking up to is that, look, the Grandview Triangle is always going to get built. The interchange in St. Louis, the widening of Highway 40 and the interchange at 270, these are on the State Transportation Implementation Plan, the STIP. These are going to get built. The lettered roads in this state, they're not on the STIP. And so when MoDOT is underfunded, it's the lettered roads that crumble first. It's the 600 bridges that need repair that erode first. And it's Missouri's #1 agricultural economy that is suffering when the Republican Party refuses to invest in the people and in the economy of this state. And we're going to change that. Let me tell you one other thing that is of concern, because it's not happening in Jefferson City, and we need to change course. And that is, we need a state capitol that stands up for the working people of this state. Gary was talking about organized labor and the influence that organized labor has had in this community. This county, Jefferson County, these are stalwart union communities. And it's one of the reasons that I learned so much when I was a young person in this profession about the importance of what these organizations do to build middle-class families in our state. There's a group of Republicans that are trying to bring in now right to work. And obviously I'm against this. But let's talk about we know, the reason I'm against it is because we know what right to work does in a state. Some of you have heard me tell this story before, others of you have not. If we were all to drive up Highway 29, north of Kansas City, up into northwest Missouri, into Holt County, take a left on Highway 159, you would come to a small town as you approach the Missouri River called Fortescue, Missouri. Just beyond Fortescue, Missouri, is the old Rouleau Bridge. And on the other side, in the state of Nebraska, a small town called Rouleau, Nebraska. This bridge was built over the Missouri River in about 1935 by President Roosevelt and the U.S. Congress during those years. For 75 years, it carried traffic and goods, people, back and forth between the two states. In 2010, the old bridge was showing its wear, and the communities decided that it was time to build a new bridge. And so the Department of Transportation got together and decided on a plan to site a new Rouleau Bridge about 600 feet to the south of the old bridge. The plan was simple enough. The Missouri span would begin in Fortescue and move west, be built out west over the Missouri River. The Nebraska side would begin in Rouleau and come back to the east, and the two sides would meet in the middle. And the job was bid to a contractor. The contractor went out and began to pull the wage sheets in the two communities. And that's when the contractor realized that he had a big problem. Because, as you all know, Nebraska is a right-to-work state. And Missouri, for now, and God willing into the future, is not. And so when the contractor pulled the wage sheets for the laborers that he wanted to hire in the state of Missouri, he saw that those laborers made $31.50 an hour. And when he pulled the wage sheets in Nebraska, what he found was that the laborers there made $8.50 an hour. two sets of workers working on those two spans out toward the center of that river. Two hopes and aspirations for their children's future. Two different health care coverages, two different retirement systems, two different pensions. And let's be honest, two different marriages. Because while all of us hope and believe that there will be love in every marriage, the marriage that faces life, looking at $8.50 an hour, with modest health care and no pension, faces an entirely different set of challenges in this world than the marriage that is making $31 an hour and has a good health care plan and an honest pension that will provide for their family's retirement into the future. And so the contractor did really the only thing that that contractor could do. He paid everybody on the job the Missouri wage. We know what right to work looks like. Go to the state that is losing Carrier Heating and Cooling right now. Carrier Heating and Cooling, one of the oldest and most important makers of air conditioning and heating units in this country, a company that has been successful in building itself up on our soil in this nation since 1915, is packing up and leaving Indianapolis to move to Monterrey, Mexico. Why are they leaving Indianapolis to move to Monterrey? Because they no longer want to pay the citizens of Indianapolis $21 an hour. Because they're going to Mexico so that they can pay the citizens there $19 a day. $2.35 an hour. One of the most important and successful organizations in that industrial space is saying to the people of this country who have been buying these things and plugging them into their houses for 110 years that this company has no intention of ever again paying a union wage. In fact, this company has no intention of paying the minimum wage. It has no intention of paying half the minimum wage. And yet, Indiana is a right-to-work state. The citizens of Indiana were told by that legislature and by the extremists in that party that if they would just give up their collective bargaining rights, if they would just trade away their security for the future, if they would just give away their health care plan and their pensions, that their jobs and their futures would be secure. And after Carrier made those demands and took everything it wanted and got everything from those workers that they could, they immediately turned their back on that state, those citizens, and this country and moved to Mexico. My friends, it is your job and it is my job to make certain that the citizens of the state of Missouri never make such a foolish mistake. This community is very important to me. Again, you taught me all of the fundamental lessons of government and of public service right here. Jerry and I, others, Candace Cole, many of my dear friends, some of whom still work with me to this day. We worked down on the square in Harrisonville, and when people's lives were devastated by violence, they came and they sat in my office. Jerry and myself, Candace, others, we walked them through the criminal justice system. We helped them through the social services network. We made sure that they were plugged into the victim advocacy world and that they were taken care of. One of my opponents on the Republican side says that when they fought domestic violence, in this state by going up onto the floor of the Missouri General Assembly and casting a vote against domestic violence. When I fought domestic violence, we did it by putting the jerk behind bars. We did it by making sure that the woman with the black eye and her 3 children had a place to sleep that night. Usually at Hope Haven, where I was on the board, and where Karen Metter and many others of you in this room, Chaz, others, helped raise money at the chili supper that we would hold every year down off the square in Harrisonville. This community taught me that government service is about person-to-person interaction. It doesn't happen in a world of lobbyists. God knows it doesn't happen in a world of fancy dinners at Capitol Grill. It happens the way it happens in Harrisonville. Person to person, one-on-one, no television cameras, no fanfare, just folks caring about one another. And the closer we get to this decision that our fellow citizens are going to make at the end, near the end of this year, the more I believe that what is desperately needed in that governor's office is that sense that politics and government and service is person to person. That's what I'm trying to bring there. The spirit that you instilled in me and my team is the spirit I'm trying to take to the governor's office of this state. And I ask you to work with me over the next 6.5 months to do well right here in Cass County. I'll be back for the parades. I'll be back for more of Ashley's fundraisers. We're going to get this young woman elected, and she's going to be a new state representative next year in Jefferson City. This community is a very important community electorally around the state. So let's bond together. Let's win this. And let's show the people of the state of Missouri that their government can still work person to person. Thanks, everybody.